The grease under Adam Kessler's fingernails had not come out, no matter how hard he'd scrubbed at the gas station sink that morning, and now, standing on the polished stone floor of Corvo Motors' downtown tower, he was suddenly painfully aware of it. The lobby was the size of a cathedral. Everything in it seemed designed to remind a man where he stood. The ceiling 4 stories up, the reception desk carved from a single pale slab of something that had probably cost more than his garage cleared in a year. The air conditioned to a temperature that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with control. He kept one hand wrapped around the manila folder and the other around his daughter's small fingers. "Daddy, it's really quiet in here," Etta whispered. She was 7. Her sneakers, the ones with the frayed laces he kept meaning to replace, squeaked against the floor, and the sound seemed enormous. She had her stuffed fox tucked under one arm, the one Rachel had bought her at the county fair 3 summers ago, the one that was more gray now than orange. "I know, baby. We won't be long." He'd promised her ice cream after. He'd promised himself he'd stay calm. He had rehearsed it in the truck on the drive down from Redfield, all 90 minutes of highway, saying it out loud to the windshield until it sounded reasonable. "I need 10 minutes. I have documents that concern the Vesper launch. My name is Adam Kessler and I used to work here." Reasonable. Level. The way an engineer explains a fault to a room full of people who don't want to hear it. The woman at the desk looked up as he approached. Her badge read Corvo in raised silver letters, no name, and her smile was the kind that turned off the moment it had done its job. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with Adele Crane. It's about the licensing signing scheduled for this afternoon." Something in her expression cooled a full degree. "Do you have an appointment with Miss Crane?" "No, but this can't wait until Ms. Crane doesn't take walk-ins. If you'll leave your information, someone from her office may reach out." She was already reaching for a notepad, the motion practiced dismissive. "I've been trying to reach her office for 6 days, Adam said. "Phone, email, certified mail. Nobody answers. I'm running out of time and so is she." The woman's eyes did a quick, efficient sweep. The work boots, the flannel over a t-shirt, the child, the hands. Back to the hands. "Sir, I'd be happy to take a message. My name is Adam Kessler. I hold a licensing agreement on the thermal isolation module in the Vesper battery pack. Any transfer of that patent to a third party requires my written consent. There's a deal closing at 3 o'clock today that can't legally close without it." He set the folder on the desk, slid it an inch toward her. "That's all in here. I'm not trying to cause a problem. I'm trying to stop one." For half a second she hesitated, and he thought maybe she'd pick up the phone and say the right thing to the right person. Then her hand moved instead to a button set into the underside of the desk, and her voice went smooth and rehearsed again. "One moment, please." 2 men in dark blazers came through a side door that Adam hadn't noticed, the way that kind of door is always designed not to be noticed. They moved with the easy, unhurried confidence of men who had removed a lot of people from a lot of lobbies. The taller one had a jaw like a shovel. The other one wore an earpiece and didn't look at Adam at all, which was somehow worse. "Sir." Shoveljaw stopped a comfortable arm's length away. "We're going to need you to head back outside. I understand how this looks." Adam kept his voice down for Etta's sake. "I worked in this building for 11 years. I designed part of the car you're about to break. I need 10 minutes with the person signing that deal, and then I'll walk out on my own. That's not going to happen today. Let's go, nice and easy." Etta pressed against his leg. She had gone very still the way she did now, whenever there were strange men and raised voices, and Adam felt the old guilt tighten in his chest. She'd been 4 when the ambulance came for Rachel the last time, 4 years old, on the front step in her pajamas, while the paramedics worked and the neighbors watched from their porches, and everyone spoke in that low, careful register that even a small child can read as something is ending. She didn't remember it in pictures. She remembered it in her body. Strange men, serious faces, the way the air changed. "Adam," he turned. The elevator across the lobby had opened, and a woman stepped out reading something on her phone, flanked by a man carrying a leather portfolio. She was tall, dark hair pulled back, dressed in a charcoal suit that was expensive in the way that didn't announce itself. Adele Crane. He recognized her from the annual reports, the earnings calls he'd watched from his kitchen table long after he'd stopped having any reason to. She looked older in person, or maybe just more tired. She was saying something to the man beside her about wire timing when her eyes came up and found the scene. The security men, the child, the mechanic in the middle of her marble floor, and her step didn't break, but her face did something small and calculating. Mrs. Crane. Adam's voice carried across the space before the guard's hand closed on his shoulder. 2 minutes, that's all I need. Everything in the lobby seemed to pause. The receptionist, the man with the portfolio, a cluster of people crossing near the far wall who suddenly found their phones very interesting. Crane walked toward him instead of away, which he hadn't expected. She stopped 6 feet off, and up close he could see that she was assessing him the same way he assessed an engine he suspected of lying about its symptoms. Who are you? Adam Kessler. I was lead engineer on the Vesper powertrain safety systems until 3 years ago. I designed the thermal isolation module. I hold the licensing rights on it, and the agreement says my consent is required before that patent gets transferred or altered. You're about to license the whole safety package to Ridgeline Capital, and I never signed anything. The man with the portfolio made a small noise, half a laugh. Miss Crane, this is exactly the kind of... Let him finish. She hadn't looked away from Adam. You have 30 seconds. Use them well. Trevor Halstead is pushing this deal through because the module has a defect he doesn't want on Corriveau's books when the lawsuits start. Adam heard his own voice go faster than he wanted it to, the calm slipping. The revised version, the one you're shipping in the Vesper right now, had the redundant cutoff removed to save $11 a unit. Under sustained fast charge load, the packs can go into thermal runaway. They'll catch fire. I flagged it 3 years ago. I have the test data in this folder. Halstead knows, and he's structured this license so that when the cars start burning, the liability lands on Ridgeline and not on you. Except Ridgeline is run by his brother-in-law, so it lands nowhere, and everybody gets paid, and people die. The silence stretched. Then Adele Crane smiled, and it was the coldest thing he had seen in a long time. You're an engineer, she said. I was. And now you fix cars in. Where'd you drive in from? The smell of your truck's still on you. Redfield. She let the name sit there like it explained everything. And you drove 90 minutes with your daughter to stand in my lobby and tell me that a man who has run my engineering division for 9 years, who has closed the biggest deal in this company's history, is a criminal based on a folder you carried in on the subway. I drove because nobody would take my call. And it's not a folder I made up. It's your own validation data. Serial numbers are on the printouts. You can check them against your own servers in 5 minutes. For just a moment, he would think about this moment for weeks afterward. Something moved behind her eyes. Doubt, maybe. The oldest instinct in anyone who has ever been responsible for anything. What if? Then it was gone, folded back under whatever she had spent 20 years building. Marcus, she said, and Adam realized she meant the portfolio man. Get security to escort Mr. Kessler out. She turned to go. If you sign that license without reading this, Adam said, you'll spend the rest of your career explaining to a Senate subcommittee why you didn't. She stopped. She didn't turn around. Put it on my desk, she said to no one in particular, and then to the guards. He leaves now. Shoveljaw's hand tightened. Sir, you've been asked to leave the premises. If you don't leave voluntarily, this becomes trespassing. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Adam looked at the folder on the desk. He looked at the elevator swallowing Adele Crane. He looked at his daughter, whose eyes had filled and were about to spill, whose small hand was crushing his with a grip that hurt. Every reasonable part of him said go. Take her. Go home, you tried. And something older and harder said no. I'm not leaving until she reads it. Then you're under arrest for trespassing. A city officer had come through the front doors, called in ahead of time, unhurried. He was maybe 50, gray at the temples, the kind of tired that had layers. Sir, I need you to put your hands behind your back. Officer, listen to me. You were asked to leave. You refused. That's the whole thing right there. Hands behind your back. Etta made a sound then that Adam would hear in his sleep for a long time, a thin rising sound with no words in it, and she grabbed at his arm as the officer moved him gently, but without any give at all. Adam went down to one knee, not to resist, but to get level with her. Hey, look at me, look at me. His voice was steady even though nothing else in him was. I'm okay. This is not like before. Nobody's hurt. I'm going to talk to some people and then I'm coming right back. You're going to sit with the nice officer and I'm coming right back. You said we'd get ice cream. Her whole face crumpled around the words, and we will. I promise. Chocolate with the sprinkles. A younger officer, red-faced and freckled and clearly wishing he were anywhere else, crouched down near her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Etta," a whisper. "That's a real pretty name. Is your mom around we could call?" "My mom died." The two officers looked at each other over the child's head, and the older one's jaw worked once, and something in the room seemed to sag under the weight of it. From across the lobby near the elevators, Adele Crane had stopped after all. She was watching. Her face gave away nothing, but she had stopped. They got Adam to his feet. The cuffs closed with 3 small clicks that were far too loud. Through the tall glass, at the front of the building, he could see the street, the ordinary city street, with its ordinary indifferent traffic. And it seemed like a photograph of a place he used to be able to go. "There's a woman named Diane Alvarez at Redfield Elementary," he told the freckled officer, forcing the words to come out in order. "She's my emergency contact. Her number's in my phone, front pocket. She'll take Etta. Please. Please call her before you do anything else." "We'll take care of her, sir." They walked him out. Etta stood pressed against the glass with her palms flat and her fox dangling from one hand, and she wasn't crying loudly anymore. She was doing the worst thing, the silent thing, watching him with her whole small face. Their eyes held until the cruiser door shut and cut the line between them. And somewhere in the back of that car, in the smell of old vinyl and other people's bad days, Adam Kessler decided he was done being polite about any of it. The Redfield he'd built his second life in was 90 minutes and a whole universe away from that lobby. He thought about it in the holding cell, the garage with its 2 bays and the hand-painted sign, the coffee maker that only worked if you hit it, the regulars who paid him in cash and casseroles, and the occasional quart of firewood. He'd walked away from a 6-figure salary and a corner of an engineering floor to fix Buicks for retirees, and people in his old life had told him it was grief-talking. Maybe it had been. But it had also been the only honest thing he could think to do, after they'd spent Rachel's last 2 years watching the medical bills eat everything they'd saved, after he'd sold his patent rights to Corriveau for a lump sum that had covered 8 months of a treatment that hadn't worked, after he'd sat in a conference room and been told that the redundant cutoff he'd spent 3 years designing was being value-engineered out of the production model, and that his objection was noted for the record. He'd kept one thing. When he sold the patent, half out of exhaustion and half out of some instinct he couldn't have named at the time, he'd made his lawyer insert a single clause. The license was personal to Corriveau and could not be transferred, sold, or assigned to any third party without his written consent, and the safety design could not be materially altered in a licensed product without his sign-off. Boilerplate, the company's attorneys had called it. A vanity clause. They'd let him have it the way you let a drowning man keep his hat. He hadn't thought about it in 3 years. Then, 6 days ago, a certified letter had arrived at the garage, a legally required notice of intent to transfer, buried in 9 pages of dense type, sent to his old home address and forwarded by a neighbor who'd known Rachel. Ridgeline Capital. The Vesper safety package. Closing in 8 business days. And Adam had sat at his kitchen table with the letter and a cold cup of coffee and understood, all at once, both that they had forgotten about him and that he was the only thing standing in their way. "Kessler." The guard's voice pulled him back. "Attorney's here for you." "I don't have an attorney." He'd been trying to figure out how to afford one for an hour. "Well, one's here. Let's go." The woman waiting in the gray meeting room was somewhere past 60, with cropped white hair and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, and the general bearing of someone who had watched every kind of nonsense the human race could produce and had run entirely out of patience for it around 1998. She had a briefcase open in front of her and a legal pad already half full. "Mr. Kessler, Francis Doyle, sit down. I didn't call anyone." "No, you didn't. I've been watching for a filing on the Vesper patent for about 3 years, on retainer, and yesterday afternoon, Corriveau filed their transfer notice with the state, and my alert went off. And this morning, a paralegal of mine pulled the arrest log as a matter of routine, and there was your name." She said all this without looking up. "Do you know who paid my retainer?" "No, you did. Your original patent attorney set up a monitoring account when you signed your sale agreement, funded out of your settlement, in case Corriveau ever tried to move that license without your consent. You probably signed the authorization in a stack of 40 other documents during the worst year of your life and never registered what it was." Now she looked up and her eyes behind the glasses were sharp as chipped flint. It was one of the smartest things anyone in your position has ever done, and I'd bet money you don't remember doing it. Adam didn't remember doing it. He remembered signing 40 documents during the worst year of his life. He remembered the pen skipping. He remembered Rachel asleep down the hall. I watched the lobby footage before I drove over, Doyle went on. Corriveau's counsel already had it pulled. You were emotional, and you led with an accusation instead of your standing, which is exactly backwards, and it got you arrested. But you weren't wrong about the law. That's the part that matters. She slid a document across the table. This is your Execute Sale License Agreement, 2019, Section 9, Subsection C. Any transfer of the licensed technology to a non-affiliate requires the licensors, that's you, prior written consent. Ridgeline is a non-affiliate. You have not consented, which means the deal they're closing at 3 o'clock this afternoon is void the second they sign it. Can we stop it? I filed for an emergency injunction 40 minutes ago. I have a judge who owes me a favor and a clerk who owes me two. The moment Corriveau tries to execute that transfer, we freeze it. She capped her pen. The question isn't whether I can stop it, Mr. Kessler. The question is why you'd want to. You sold these rights. You could have stayed home. So why drive 90 minutes with a 7-year-old to get yourself arrested over a car company that already chewed you up once? Adam looked at his hands on the gray table, the grease he couldn't scrub out. Because the cars are going to kill people, he said. Because I know exactly how they're going to kill people. I ran the failure simulations. Under repeated high rate, charging the removed redundancy means a single cell fault can propagate across the pack before the primary cutoff even registers it. Best case, it's a car fire in an empty driveway at 3 in the morning. Worst case, it's a family on the interstate. He swallowed. My wife spent the last year of her life in a hospital, and I couldn't do a single thing to stop what was killing her. This I can stop, so I'm going to stop it. Doyle was quiet for a moment. Then she closed her briefcase with a decisive snap. They dropped your charges 20 minutes ago, by the way. Trespassing doesn't hold when the man was there to exercise a legal right and the arrest looks like retaliation on video. The city attorney figured that out about the same time I called and reminded him. She stood, straightened her jacket. Your daughter's with a Mrs. Alvarez, safe, asking every 10 minutes when her father's coming home. We'll get you to her tonight. But first, she gestured at the door. You and I are going to go back to Corriveau Motors, and this time we're walking in with paper they cannot shred. The town car she'd come in was black and silent and completely out of place at the curb of a precinct house. Adam sat in the back with the folder, his folder, the one Crane had ordered put on her desk, which Doyle had somehow already obtained a certified copy of the underlying data for, and watched the city slide by. The leather seats were soft. That detail lodged in him for reasons he couldn't explain, the softness of the seats after the cracked vinyl of the cruiser. Adele Crane, he said. You know her? I've been across a table from her twice. Won once, lost once. Doyle was making notes in the margins of something with a fountain pen. She's not a bad person, which makes her more dangerous than most of the people I deal with, because she thinks she can't be fooled. She grew up poor outside Youngstown, put herself through Case Western working nights, clawed her way up through a company that assumed she was there to take the minutes. Everything she has, she earned by being the smartest and least sentimental person in the room. Halstead figured that out years ago. He learned to bring her clean numbers and never make her feel stupid, and she trusts him the way you trust the ground. She glanced up. That's how men like Halstead work. They don't lie to careful people. They just make the careful person's confidence do the lying for them. And Halstead? Doyle's expression flattened into something almost hungry. Trevor Halstead I have wanted for a long time. He did a version of this at a supplier in Indianapolis 15 years ago, walked away clean when the man who could have testified had a very convenient change of heart and a new lake house. If your data is what you say it is, Mr. Kessler, then I am going to enjoy today more than is probably decent. The second time Adam walked through the tall glass doors of Corriveau Motors, no one tried to stop him. The receptionist recognized them and went pale. Doyle didn't slow down. Francis Doyle, Doyle and Rourke, here to see Adele Crane regarding the Ridgeline transfer. She laid a card and a document on the desk. That's a filed notice of an emergency injunction entered this morning. You'll want to tell Ms. Crane that if she executes that license without my client's written consent, She's in personal breach of her fiduciary duty and looking at individual liability. I'd move quickly. It's 10 of 3. They rode up in silence except for the hum of the elevator. On the executive floor, a man was waiting when the doors opened. The portfolio man from before, Marcus, whom Doyle greeted by his last name, Braddock, with the wariness of old acquaintances on opposite sides. Adam had it wrong. His name was Neil Braddock, Crane's chief of staff, and he looked 10 years older than he had that morning. Mrs. Doyle. Braddock rubbed his face. You really doing this? I really am. She won't stop the signing. She's dug in. Then she's going to have a spectacularly expensive afternoon. Doyle nodded at Adam. You've met my client. Braddock looked at Adam a long moment, and there was something in his face that might have been an apology. For what it's worth, he said quietly as he keyed them through the glass doors. I told her to look at your folder. She didn't, Doyle said. No. His jaw tightened. Halstead told her not to. Said it was sabotage. The boardroom was everything Adam had expected, and worse. A table like a runway, windows holding the whole city hostage below, and around the near end a cluster of people with documents fanned out in front of them, and a man in wire-rimmed glasses walking someone through signature blocks. At the head sat Trevor Halstead, silver-haired, tanned, wearing a suit and a smile that had closed 100 deals, and beside him Adele Crane, pen already uncapped in her hand. Every head turned when Doyle pushed through the door. What is this? Crane was on her feet before the second word. Francis Doyle. I represent Adam Kessler, licensor of record on the thermal isolation patent embedded in the Vesper safety package. Doyle set her briefcase on the walnut like she owned it. Under Section 9 of the 2019 sale agreement, no transfer of that technology to a non-affiliate may occur without Mr. Kessler's written consent. Ridgeline Capital is a non-affiliate. Mr. Kessler has not consented. Any signature you put on that license in the next several minutes is legally void, and I have an injunction on file that says so. This is a disruption tactic. Halstead's voice was smooth and unbothered, and he didn't so much as glance at Adam. Mrs. Doyle is well known for exactly this kind of theater. Robert, keep going. I need to see those documents. Wire rims. Robert, apparently Ridgeline's counsel, had put his pen down. Of course you do, Halstead said. So we can verify they're fabricated and get back to verify away. Doyle handed the man a folder. The agreement's genuine, the recordings with the county, and if you'd like, Miss Crane can have someone pull the original from your own legal archive. I'll wait, Robert read. The room watched him read. Adam could hear a watch ticking somewhere, or maybe it was his own pulse. It took 2 minutes that felt like an hour, and then Robert set the folder down and looked at Adele Crane with the specific expression of a man deciding not to go to prison for someone else's deal. It's authentic, he said. The consent right is real, and it's enforceable. Miss Crane, we can't close today. My clients won't touch a transfer this exposed. That's ridiculous, Crane said, but her voice had changed. It's the contract, Robert said, and started packing his bag. Crane turned to Adam, and her eyes were cut from glass. You did this. I tried to warn you this morning, Adam said. You had me arrested instead. You want to blow up 8 months of work over a clause my lawyers should have caught. I want to keep you from shipping a car that catches fire. He heard how quiet his own voice had gone. That's all I ever wanted. The consent clause is just the only door you left me. What do you want then? She threw the words like a challenge. Money? Everyone wants money. Name it and I'll have it wired before you reach the lobby. I don't want your money. He set the certified data on the table and slid it toward her, the same motion he'd made at the reception desk that morning, and this time nobody stopped it. I want you to open that. And then I want you to ask Trevor Halstead why Ridgeline Capital's managing partner is his wife's brother, and why he never disclosed it, and why the license was structured to strip the recall liability off your books and dump it on a firm his family controls. The room went very still. Adele Crane looked slowly from Adam to Halstead. Trevor Curtis Vale and I are not close, Halstead said, and it was the first crack tiny a hairline. My wife's brother. We barely speak. I recused myself from the vendor selection. It's all documented. You disclosed a brother-in-law named Curtis, Doyle said pleasantly. You did not disclose that Curtis runs Ridgeline, or that in the last 7 months your personal cell has logged 31 calls to his, or that a Delaware LLC with your wife's maiden name as its registered agent holds a 4% stake in Ridgeline. Would you like me to keep going, or shall I let Miss Crane read the internal emails first? Halstead's face had lost most of its color. What emails? Doyle didn't answer him. She looked at Crane. Ms. Crane, your former engineer flagged a thermal defect 3 years ago. He was overruled to save $11 a unit. That decision was Mr. Halstead's. When the field failure reports started coming in this spring, and they have been coming in quietly, 3 so far, all written off as owner misuse, Mr. Halstead did not initiate a recall. He initiated a sale. Because a recall costs Corvo roughly $400 million and personally embarrasses the man who removed the safety feature, whereas licensing the technology to affirm his family controls moves the liability off your ledger. Collects a $600 million fee and lets everyone walk away rich before the first lawsuit is even filed. The only person who could stop it was a man he'd forgotten existed, until this morning. Adele Crane sat down slowly. She picked up the folder Adam had slid to her. She opened it, and Adam watched the CEO of Corvo Motors read her own company's test data, page after page, her face going from stone to something much more human, and when she looked up, her voice had dropped so low the room had to lean in to hear it. 3 field failures, she said. This spring. And I was never told. You were told they were misuse, Braddock said quietly from the doorway. The summaries came through Trevor's office. Adel. Halstead started. Do not. She didn't raise her voice, which was worse than if she had. 9 years, Trevor. I put my name behind you in front of the board a dozen times. I let you build the division. And you were going to let people burn to death in cars with my name on the fender so your brother-in-law could flip the liability and your family could pocket the spread. She turned to Braddock. Get legal. Get compliance. Get building security to the 37th floor. Mr. Halstead is suspended effective immediately, pending referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Halstead stood so fast his chair rolled back into the window. You need me. You have no idea how many of these deals That, Doyle said, is going to be a very interesting subject for the investigators. For one moment, something ugly and honest crossed Trevor Halstead's face, and he looked at Adam Kessler with pure hatred. This is on you, he said. Adam said nothing. He'd said everything he needed to. They spent the next hour in a version of controlled chaos. Ridgeline's people fleeing, board members arriving with their phones already ringing, Corvo's own attorneys white-faced over a recall they were only now learning was coming. Adam mostly stood by the window, out of the way, watching a city he had no place in go about its afternoon. At some point, Adele Crane crossed the emptying room and stood beside him. How did you know it would fail like that? She said. Not a challenge now. A question. Because I designed it not to, he said. The redundancy wasn't decoration. It was the whole point. You take it out to save money. You're not saving money. You're just deciding when you'll pay and who pays it. She was quiet. Then, I had you arrested in front of your daughter. You did. I looked at you and I saw a man in work boots with a grievance, and I decided I knew everything I needed to. Her jaw worked. I grew up 30 minutes from a town where the plant poisoned the water for a decade because it was cheaper than fixing it. And everybody who could have stopped it decided the person warning them wasn't worth listening to. I told myself I'd never be one of those people. And this morning I was one of those people in about 40 seconds. She looked at him directly. I'm sorry, that's not enough, but I'm sorry. Adam thought about being angry. He had every right to it. But he was mostly just tired, and he wanted his daughter. Fix the cars, he said. That's the part I care about. I'm going to fix the cars. She said it like a vow. Then, after a moment, the board will want to pay you. There'll be a settlement for the retaliation, the arrest, the whole thing. It'll be substantial. My advice as someone who has watched a lot of people make this decision badly is take it. I'll think about it, Adam said, and didn't. Braddock drove him home himself, which surprised Adam, all 90 minutes up the highway to Redfield in the fading light, the two of them not talking much. Near the county line, Braddock said, I owe you one. She was going to sign. I'd handed her the pen. And Adam said it was all right, and neither of them believed that exactly, but it was a decent thing to say. Etta was at Mrs. Alvarez's, and she launched off the porch steps and into his arms before the car door was fully open, and he caught her and held on and breathed in the smell of her hair, which was crayons and grape juice and something that was just her, and for a while he couldn't say anything at all. You came back, she said into his neck. I told you I would. You said ice cream. He laughed, and it came out wet. Chocolate, sprinkles. We'll go right now. Mrs. Alvarez, you want to come get ice cream? It wasn't over, of course. Doyle had warned him it wouldn't be. Trevor Halstead did not go quietly. Men like Halstead never do. Within the week, he'd hired his own attorneys and filed a countersuit, painting himself as a whistleblower upon raising concerns about Adele Crane's leadership. And he'd leaked a version of the story to a business reporter that ran under a headline, making Adam sound like an opportunist with a grudge and a lawyer. For 2 days, the phone at the garage rang with numbers Adam didn't recognize, and once late, a text from a blocked line. "You should have stayed in your little town." He blocked it. Another came. "This isn't finished." He called Doyle, who told him to forward everything and photograph nothing that could be tampered with, and above all, not to reply, and who then filed for a restraining order the same afternoon. The thing that broke it open came from a woman named Dana Whitlock. She'd been Halstead's senior validation engineer for 6 years, the one who signed off on test protocols, the one who knew where the data actually lived, and she'd been quietly walked out of the building the day after the suspension, part of the house cleaning, a loose end. She was angry, and she was frightened, and she asked to meet Adam and not the lawyers, at a diner off Route 9 halfway between the city and Redfield, because, she said, he was the only person in this whole thing who wasn't trying to win something. She was younger than he'd expected, hands wrapped around a coffee she wasn't drinking. "I kept telling myself the field reports were what Trevor said they were," she told him. Owner misuse. Aftermarket chargers. I wanted to believe it because the alternative meant I'd been putting my signature on it. She slid a drive across the sticky table. The alternative is on there. His side of the correspondence with Vale. The internal failure analyses he had reclassified. A message where he tells Vale the 400 number is perfect. Low enough they clean up on the flip, high enough the board won't ask questions. Her voice cracked. "There's a family in Ohio. A fire in July." Their report got coded as misuse 3 days before the transfer notice went out. Their names are in there too. She pushed her chair back. "Use it, and tell people it was me. I want my name on the right side of this, even if it costs me every job I'll ever get." Doyle's forensic people authenticated the drive in a single afternoon, and this time Doyle didn't rush to file. She waited. She let Halstead's confident, self-righteous press narrative run for a full news cycle, let him repeat under lights every claim the emails contradicted, and then, on a Monday morning, she released all of it at once. By noon, the story was everywhere, and Trevor Halstead's own words were running beside the footage of him calling himself a whistleblower, and the contrast was a thing no attorney on earth could spin. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced an inquiry the following Thursday. The countersuit collapsed under its own weight before the month was out. He was arrested on a Friday. He'd tried to leave the city through the service entrance of his building, and the agents had been waiting. He wouldn't get bail, the judge citing the family money and the passport and the 31 phone calls. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and a growing list. Curtis Vale and Ridgeline were named in a separate filing that would take years to unwind. And through all of it, Boardroom Motors did the thing Adam had driven 90 minutes and gotten handcuffed to make them do. They issued the recall. Every Vesper on the road called back, the safety package rebuilt to the original specification, his specification, the redundancy restored, the $11 a unit paid at last. Adele Crane announced it herself, in front of cameras, taking questions she didn't have to take, and when a reporter asked her why she was doing a $400 million recall the company could have buried, she said, "Because someone I had thrown out of my building on his knees was right, and I was wrong. And there are children who ride in these cars." She didn't smile when she said it. It wasn't that kind of statement. There was a settlement offer. Adam turned it down. He sat across from Adele Crane in a conference room one gray morning and pushed the paperwork back across the table, and she looked at the number he was refusing and shook her head. "You have a daughter," she said. "A garage that I'd bet doesn't clear much. You could move somewhere the roof doesn't leak. Take the money." "If I take it," Adam said, "then every version of this story ends with the guy who did it for a payout. And someday Etta reads that. I'd rather she read the other one." He paused. "There is something you can do." Crane waited. "That family in Ohio, and any others Halstead's people buried. Take care of them. Really take care of them. Not a check and a non-disclosure. And put something in place so the next engineer who flags a defect has somewhere to send it that isn't the desk of the guy who caused it." He set his hands flat on the table, the grease still in the creases of them. "Build that. Then we're square. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she made a note in a small book and said, "Done," and meant it, and offered him a job on top of it. An advisory role, part-time, someone to sit in the room when the careful people were about to be too confident. And he told her he'd think about it, and this time he actually did. He drove home in his own truck, the one that still smelled like the garage, and picked Etta up from Mrs. Alvarez's, and they got ice cream because they'd gotten into the habit of it, and they sat on the tailgate in the fading light at the edge of the town he'd chosen when the old life ended. She was working her way through a scoop of chocolate that was mostly on her chin. "Daddy," she said, "the lady who was mean to you, is she still mean?" "No, baby. She figured out she was wrong, and then she fixed it." Etta considered this with the enormous seriousness of a 7-year-old. "That's good," she decided. "Being wrong isn't the bad part. The bad part is not fixing it." She licked her spoon. "Mrs. Alvarez said that. Mrs. Alvarez is a smart woman." The sun went down behind the water tower, with Redfield painted on it in letters somebody's grandfather had lettered, and the town got quiet and golden the way it did, and Adam Kessler sat on the tailgate of his truck with his daughter leaning warm against his side, and thought that he had spent the last year of his old life unable to save the one person he'd have given anything to save, and that he had spent one long, terrible, ordinary day being unable to stop saving strangers he'd never meet. He didn't have the money he'd turned down. He still had the leaky roof and the coffee maker you had to hit. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Etta finished her ice cream and wiped her chin on her sleeve, which he pretended not to see, and she yawned, and she said, "Can we do burgers tomorrow instead of the good vegetables?" And he said they'd see, which they both understood meant yes. And he lifted her down off the tailgate, and they drove the 2 miles home in the dark, with the windows down and the radio low. And the cars that passed them on the county road went by without catching fire, every single one, all the way home.